It out. I would now like to welcome my next guest here into the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I know he's in studio. The Chair Emeritus of the Rhode Island Progressive Democrats of America, Sam Bell. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you so much for having me.
Come on over, put your right foot here. We'll tell folks everything which is going on with the Progressive Democrats right now, because there's no shortage. There was a meeting on Tuesday night. Now, a lot of activity since the end of the session, not the actual end, because of the abrupt halt to the end of the session.
Which is one of the things that progressives were very concerned about.
Yeah, so talk with us a little bit about maybe even in the recent weeks leading up to this week. We're hearing a little bit more that the Senate President and the House Speaker are talking. There looks like there could be some movement here. But how is the role of the Progressive Democrats? How did you see it? And again, putting this pressure on, saying, you can't wait and let all of this hang in the balance.
You know, it's interesting. I stepped down from chairing the Progressive Democrats a couple months ago, and it's exciting to see how the rest of the group is going forward and finding its own voice. So it's not just what I think, it's what the group thinks. I'm no longer chairing it, and it was never a dictatorship, so what I think may be immaterial. But I think part of the group's role is to speak out when others are afraid to do so, and to speak out, tell truth to power. Because in our state, there are lots of things that are going badly, badly wrong. And we need people who are willing to stand up and say, it's not okay if the speaker has a temper tantrum and throws the session into jeopardy, jeopardizes our state's credit rating, and just because he was angry that the upper chamber of our legislature had the audacity to think that it could amend a piece of legislation. It's bad leadership, and we do need a group that's willing to call that out. You know, while I chaired the Progressive Democrats, I felt like I was able to help bring the group to play a broader role in taking on the machine that's running our state into the ground. I think a lot of people don't fully understand, but the machine that runs Rhode Island's Democratic Party is a very politically conservative machine. The House Speaker and the Senate President are both endorsed by Right to Life and the NRA. They oppose women's right to choose, common sense gun safety reform. They stand hard against the Democratic Party's fundamental views on social issues. And when it comes to economic issues, our conservatism is just off the charts. It's really hard to find a red state that's cut taxes for the rich as much as Rhode Island did. You know, from 2006 to 2010, we cut the top income tax rate by 3.91 points. And since we did that, no other state has cut it that much. Not even Kansas or other Tea Party governments.
That's unbelievable. That is. I did not know that statistic, but I have been following what the progressives have been saying. You know, this session that's hanging in the balance. What are the important issues that you are saying and have been urging both chambers to again be able to? There's so many things hanging in the balance that you guys have been pointing out.
Well, you know, I'm not sure exactly how much is hanging in the balance. A lot of things are worked out. But the most important bill that is yet to pass is a really crucial Senate bill. It's the bill to protect Rhode Island from Trump care. This came out of Joshua Miller, the progressive senator from Cranston's role chairing the new policy committee of the Democrats in the Senate. And what he correctly identified is that Trump care is going to cause devastating harm to Rhode Islanders, and we need to be protected. And that means we need to codify into law the essential health benefits of the Affordable Care Act. And it's extremely disappointing that the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of Corporations in the House, Jacquard, another Cranston rep, are holding up this piece of core Democratic Party legislation, and they're keeping Rhode Islanders from having the protections we need in case Trump care passes. So I think that's probably the single most important piece of legislation that's hanging in the balance.
And you said, we were talking a little bit before of things that you might want to talk about. You said you wanted to talk about what you call Medicaid and Raimondo Care.
Right. Well, Raimondo Care is not the same thing as Medicaid. It's more of a war on Medicaid. You know, Raimondo has had a series of policy ideas on health care, and they all come down to pretty much the same thing that lies at the core of Trump care: slashing Medicaid time and time again. It started off with the whole sort of Trump care style thing of we take cuts across the board and we let the providers and everyone else beneath figure out who's going to be hurt by it. In Rhode Island, that winds up meaning a lot of poor people, a lot of small doctors' offices and providers that are struggling right now. It also winds up being some hospitals in low-income areas that are teetering on the edge of financial ruin, and jobs that could easily collapse, and which would cause devastating damage to our state. And then she doubled down by deliberately underfunding the implementation of UHIP, of the state's computer system, which was, the whole point of it was to try and catch supposed fraudsters who were supposedly on Medicaid fraudulently, which it failed to do because actually there wasn't this massive wave of fraud out there. And so after she mismanaged the whole UHIP debacle, causing even more pain to our state's Medicaid system, they decided to go even further with something quite cruel, which is they decided to kick 20,000 Rhode Islanders off the program without due process. And that's incredibly cool. When you lose access to health care, sometimes people die. And we need a governor, we need this governor to understand that the same policies that she's saying are wrong when Trump does them, she can't go ahead and implement very similar policies here in Rhode Island and think that it's okay and think that it's not going to cause the same kind of damage that Trump care would. Medicaid is one of the Democratic Party's most important achievements. We have to fight to protect it, and we need to stop cutting it here in Rhode Island. If we do not, we are going to not only see a lot of pain for poor people, but we are also going to see massive economic pain. The healthcare sector is a massive sector of our economy, and eviscerating Medicaid, especially if Trump care passes, is devastating to our healthcare industry.
Well, we're keeping all eyes on what's happening on healthcare, especially in Washington, and I know the progressive Democrats are continuing to push on that Medicaid front. And other of the issues that the progressive Democrats have been very vocal on, the PawSox. And the PawSox looking at Apex, and you say, keeping the PawSox at McCoy. How involved do you envision moving forward that the progressive Democrats will continue to be on this issue?
Well, so here I wear two hats because I chaired the Stop the Stadium Deal group, which is a campaign that successfully defeated the plan to move the PawSox to Providence's planned downtown park, which now finally looks like it's going to get built, which is an incredible win for the city of Providence, one of the few that we've had in recent years. And, you know, people said that we could never win, that there'd be no way we could defeat the stadium deal, but we beat it. We beat it by going out there, knocking on doors in the Speaker's district, by making a very clear case to the state of Rhode Island about why this was a bad deal. And I think people understand that there's something wrong with these bad stadium deals. And the deal that they're proposing in Pawtucket is nearly as outrageous as the one they were proposing in Providence. To give you an idea of just how bad it is, they're asking not just for the $38 million from the state, they're asking to not pay any taxes at all on the stadium, to have it be owned by the public so that they will be entirely tax-free and the public will pay for all the maintenance, which is one of the biggest costs. And what we know from how the PawSox have handled McCoy is that they will run the stadium into the ground because they won't do any of the maintenance themselves, and they'll obstruct the state to stop it from doing the maintenance that it needs to do, just if they might have to expend a tiny amount of their own money out of their own pocket. So it's a terrible deal, but the worst part of the deal is it takes off the table one of Pawtucket's best assets, which are these gorgeous waterfront parcels that haven't been developed because the leaders in Pawtucket haven't had the vision necessary to develop the parcels. But waterfront land is valuable. I mean, there's a set of condos down on the water, not in a great location in Pawtucket, but it's on the water, called Riverfront Condos, and it's thriving without the same level of massive subsidies that people seem to think that you need for all apartments here in Providence if they're for wealthy people. And Pawtucket could do something with these wonderful parcels on the waterfront. They could have a waterfront park, and they could develop it into a new downtown, a thriving center for the city. And what this takes off the table is it takes off the table the chance that Pawtucket can build a heart for the city on the water, a beautiful center, to what should be a great city once again.
So are you keeping close tabs as everyone else is on what's going to be happening moving forward? One of the things that got, again, hung in limbo was, again, the 11th hour proposal to really kind of put this forth and before the assembly. Are you there? Are you kind of ready to get activated if this issue comes up again?
I'm not sure it's actually going to come up again. Certainly we're ready. We're not going to let it pass. I actually don't think that anyone really wants to have this fight. They understand that people of Rhode Island oppose this. There is, I think, some understanding that radically, extremely wastefully just throwing away public money on a foolish project is a problem. And I hope that some people do understand that we need to keep the Paw Sox at McCoy. And that means we need to come up with a plan to keep them at McCoy, to figure out, to renegotiate a lease so that we get slightly better terms than we've gotten before, to keep them at McCoy. And I think people are going to start realizing as the clock gets closer that we need to start with a real plan, and a real plan does mean McCoy.
So keeping eyes on McCoy, and of course a lot of eyes looking already at 2018. It seems like we're always in the constant campaign, but a couple big races, the Providence mayor's race, of course the gubernatorial race, and we just saw in Newport and Jamestown, the Democratic primary, Dawn Ewer, moving forward to the general election. You know, talk with us a little bit about that. You know, she staved off a popular councilman down there. She staved off the pick of the Senate president.
Right.
So, I mean, do you think this is, again, indicative of the movement of the progressives in the state?
I think it's indicative of the fact that Rhode Islanders want great, strong Democrats to represent them in the General Assembly. They want honest people who are going to go up there and fight for the good of the community. I had a lot of fun knocking on doors in Newport and Jamestown. It's a truly wonderful community where people have just incredible values, a real depth of knowledge about state issues. You know, they truly impress you, the kind of questions that you get on the doors. And I'm really excited that Dawn won. I'm not surprised given the kind of values our state stands for, and I know that she is going to make a great state senator once she resoundingly defeats her Republican opponent.
And what are you hearing for 18? Are you hearing folks out there maybe expressing interest of looking to possibly run, you know, for the assembly, for those, you know, those seats? You know, what are you hearing since
Rhode
since
Islanders
16?
Are completely fed up with the machine that's been running our state into the ground. It's horrifying to watch what's happened to our state. And people around the state get it. They understand that our state has been radically mismanaged by a conservative machine that's taken over our Democratic Party. Rhode Islanders are Democrats, but we don't support the machine. And I think you're going to see a wave of people rising up and defeating a lot of these hardcore right-wing machine incumbents and putting in place a real Democratic legislature, one that is actually ethical and one that cares about democratic principles. As I'm sure you're well aware, we had tons of pretty shocking progressive victories in last year's round of General Assembly's races. You know, we unseated the Senate President Pro Tem, we unseated the House Majority Leader, won a couple other House seats, and another Senate challenge here in Providence, and there was a real wave. And next time, with even more energy, and I think that the resistance to Trump is getting more and more people aware and angry about the very similar things that are going on in our state, it's going to be a really exciting year. This really could be the year when we turn Rhode Island around and say no to the machine that's been running our state into the ground for far too long.
And what do you have to say to the Republican Party, who might agree with you with that characterization of the leadership in the state and where things currently stand?
The Republican Party in Rhode Island always has backed the machine, time and time again. The Republican Party put the machine in place. At the beginning of both the coups in the House and the Senate, it was the Republican Party that put the machine in place. They're the ones who did this to the Democratic Party. And now, as they come back and complain about it, they complain about their own policies, running the state into the ground, because they have nothing else to run on. Because yes, it is true that Republican policies fail just as badly when Democrats execute them as they do when Republicans execute them. And the whole message of Rhode Island's Republican Party has been to say, look, see how bad our policies are when other people implement them. Let us implement these same disastrous policies. And I think people often forget about the nightmarish ethical horrors of Rhode Island's Republican Party. I mean, former leader of the Republican caucus in the House was just arrested again. The last Republican governor did 38 studios. I'm not even going to go into everything that Ed DePreet did, but, you know, we don't need to dive in that dumpster.
But you see the rhetoric in social media when the Republicans especially say, oh, the progressive Democrats, they just want to tax and spend more and turn Rhode Island into a nanny state. What do you see when you see that sort of rhetoric? And you see it in social media all the time, I'm sure.
Well, I think what they forget is that Rhode Islanders don't support the tax cuts for the rich. Rhode Islanders don't support taking money away from the middle class and shoveling it into the pockets of the wealthiest Rhode Islanders and the most politically connected corporations. That's not what Rhode Islanders want. And I think that the conservative machine, both its Republican and Democratic parts, don't get that. Or they do get it and they understand the only way they can keep power is not by running on the ideas that the people want.
And finally, while I have you here in studio, again, summertime in 17, but 18's around the corner, do you think Governor Raimondo will have a primary opponent on the Democratic side?
It's a fascinating question. I don't know. I mean, I think that progressives are most focused on undoing the brutal damage that the machine in the General Assembly has wreaked upon our state. I think we made important progress last cycle, and we've mitigated some of the harms, but we need to get to the position where we are actually fixing some of the state's fundamental problems. And to do that, it means breaking the machine in the General Assembly and returning the General Assembly to rule by real Democrats who stand up for the national party's basic principles and implement the same reforms that have been so successful in Massachusetts. I do think that there are problems with the governor who's just tacking so hard to the right. I really do urge Governor Raimondo, please lay off Medicaid. Please stop implementing the Donald Trump agenda to hurt people who desperately need health care. And I think if we have a governor who is just going so hard down the Trump road when it comes to health care, it really has to ask a question of whether, you know, she really should be renominated as a Democrat.
Well, we'll be continuing to watch it closely. Clearly, there's been a lot of back and forth between the progressive Democrats and the Democratic Party by statements we've seen from Bill Lynch as well. So I'm sure we'll have you or someone from the progressive Democrats back here in the studio at some point soon.
Great.
Because you're not going anywhere.
We certainly aren't, and I am very glad that they have benched Bill Lynch and replaced him with Kevin Lossinoy, who's going to do a much better job representing our party.
Sam Bell, thank you for coming in today.
So much
I'll let
for
you around the
having me.
corner. Sam Bell, the chair emeritus of the Rhode Island Progressive Democrats of America. As we've reported in recent weeks, there's been a lot of back and forth between the Progressive Democrats and the Democratic Party here in the state. A lot focusing on how the General Assembly session waned in the waning hours, what they're looking to accomplish. Sam touched upon a number of issues, including urging the governor to not make such severe Medicaid cuts. So we touched on a bunch of issues, POSOX, Medicaid, and then of course looking at 2018 because certainly all eyes are on the gubernatorial and mayoral and of course assembly races in the next cycle. So I appreciate Sam Bell coming here into the Navigant Credit Union broadcast.